Midwest. Donna received a doctorate from ISU in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on literacy. She has served in the roles of educational leadership professor, elementary speech therapist, counselor, principal, and K-12 director of curriculum, which she is still doing now in Farmington. She has presented to and is currently presenting to teachers, administrators, and school board members throughout the state on Common Core. So, welcome, Donna McCaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I need someone to volunteer. Someone with a watch. Someone with a watch. Thank you, sir. Would you give me the 5-minute warning to being done time so that we have time to draw for the $50?
Oh, yes.
We have the $50, yeah. We have 2 20s and 2 5s that will be, so we'll be giving $50 away tonight at the end, so that'll be the last couple of minutes. Yes? What time? It's an hour, right?
It's an hour.
Yep, so we're speaking for an hour. Thank you. Otherwise, I will also tell you that the reason I'm having him talk to me now and tell me when we have 5 minutes is because I can go on forever and you all really want to go home at some point tonight. I want to talk to you tonight about Common Core, and hopefully at the end, the last 20 minutes or so, we'll have time for questions. So if you do have a question, write it down. If you're afraid to forget it, which is where I'm getting to at my age, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll answer the question when you have it, if you're afraid you'll forget the question. I like this because it's so easy today when we're bogged down with day-to-day operations and day-to-day functioning and day-to-day schedules. You know, we wake up in the morning and we just think, if we can just get through this week, we have this on our plate and this on our plate and this on our plate. If I can just get through Christmas until Christmas break, or if I can get through Thanksgiving, because that's just really crazy, where we schedule and wish our lives away, activity by activity by activity, or event by event by event. And in doing that, we're really stuck in the right now moment, worrying about something that's coming. When we really need to be thinking about a future, about our dreams and our hopes for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm not talking climate, I'm not talking, global warming and those issues, but it really comes down to, are we preparing our children to be young adults that can effectively compete in a world that continues to change? Because I'm 59 years old. I graduated from high school in 1972. And in 1972, global was a non-concept. The United States was #1 in everything. All you had to do was ask us and we told you that. And we didn't worry about a whole lot of anything. Even in the 60s, remember some of us in here? Remember in the 60s? I have shoes in my closet older than a lot of you. But for some of us in this room, remember in the 60s when Detroit laid off thousands and thousands and thousands of workers in their auto plants? Because we were so sure that we made the best of anything and everything, that we didn't worry about the competition. And slowly, companies in Japan produced better quality, cheaper. I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the way it was. We now talk all the time about global. My husband, who works for FS, who's worked for FS for 34 years, watches the 4:30 to 5 o'clock news segment on farming in South America. Because the climate that's going on and the crops that are going on down there affect the price of what's happening in Illinois. So how do we educate our children for a world that's changing all the time, that's becoming much more competitive? And I'm going to challenge the parents in this room to remember one thing tonight, if you remember nothing else, and that's this. You got to where you are in your life through hard work. You got to where you are in your life by persevering, by not giving up, and by doing the hard things. So my question to you is, why as parents do we want everything for our kids to be easy? When the hard things in our own lives helped us to be better adults and ready for the challenges of adult life. How does easy prepare us for challenges? Because the Common Core is going to require our kids to think at a much deeper level than they've had to do before. They're going to have to work harder than they've had to do before. But isn't that a necessary ingredient for being successful? Is knowing how to work hard, knowing how to think and problem solve. So I love this quote because I think we really do, we do have a sense of urgency in terms of moving forward and helping our kids become all that they can be. I found this on your website and I told him, Anthony, I like it because when we talk about Common Core, we're really talking about a growth model, identifying for students what they need to know and be able to do at every grade level, and helping them grow into that. I love the fact that commitment is another part of Common Core. Teaching our kids to start something and to finish it well. One of the things that happens is when a student does something that's not done well, and we give it back to them. Now parents, I know you never see this. Okay, so I do the dishes and I don't do them right. And you give them back to me and you say, this needs to be rewashed. You don't get the same reaction that we get in school when we give a paper back to be changed and fixed. Because this is what we get at school. Like, really? You want me to do what? The eyes have to roll as far back into the head as possible. Because you want me to change something? You want me to redo it? Because it has to meet a standard? Any of you have a boss that you can say, you know what, I'm not redoing this, you're just going to have to take it the way it is? I don't think so. So where do they learn what a standard is of acceptable performance? And where do we learn, how do we learn that we have to do it over and over and over again until it meets that standard? So commitment's important. Motivation, it really and truly, I hope, I've seen this happen in my own district, and I work with a number of districts all around the country, that students are much more engaged when we talk about Common Core. It's a much more project-based, real-world application kind of instructional design. And so because I'm not just sitting there and the teacher's talking at me and I'm pretending to take notes and then I memorize what I can and I take a test and it doesn't really matter if I've learned anything. And as soon as that chapter's over with, I can forget everything I've learned because I have to start memorizing stuff for the next chapter. Hopefully with Common Core, because it's real-world application, you'll have students that will be much more engaged. They'll be challenged to do things. They'll be challenged to produce. And there isn't just one way of assessing learning. It isn't that multiple choice test or multiple guess test. It's thinking and doing and producing. And I also like success as part of your vision, because my first job in 1975 came about because of special ed law. In 1975, I got my first job as a speech therapist. And at that time, the philosophy of special ed in this country was, we're going to take a child who's struggling, we're going to pull them out of class, we're going to give them the extra help they need, and then they'll catch up and they'll go back into their class. And over the 30-some years in special ed in this country, what happened was, we started thinking, you know what, you can't do that. We pulled you out of the class and you really can't do that. I can't help you catch up. So I'm just going to expect less from you because you're capable of less. And then the next year I'm going to expect less yet. And so rather than being a solution for you, I became part of the problem for you because of my lower expectations. Now, does that mean that I should expect as much from you as somebody with 160 IQ? No. But can you be successful and can you learn and can you produce? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the idea that we can all be successful, no matter what the challenge is, I think is also embedded in the Common Core. Because it looks at variance of performance. and recognizes that what I could do as a really smart 6th grader and what my cousin who's sitting in the aisle next to me in the same classroom maybe does, but does it differently, better in a different way. So let's talk about what the standards are so that you can see. I have a short video that I hope works because I tested it twice.
Like it or not, life is full of measuring sticks. How smart we are, how fast we are, how well we can, compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that. But when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful after graduation, is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as the graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. That's making it too hard to know if our kids are really doing well enough overall, and if they can really compete for a job someday. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. They're like a total sea change in education. Consistent, strong, clear benchmarks for English language arts and math. Here's how it works. You can think of kindergarten through 12th grade like a giant staircase. Each step is a skill your child needs to learn before stepping up to the next one. But right now, too many kids aren't really confident with like 2 plus 2 before they have to move on to 2 times 2. We need more focus on the skills that help them move up the stairs, or they can slip up and fall behind. And there's another problem. What if everyone's stairs were made at different heights? Well, here we go again. They are. So, a boy in Seattle who's rocking an A in English literature could be getting a C on his Chicago friend's staircase. Oops. We need to create consistent steps in education too. So first, each standard creates a landing on the staircase, a stop along the way as your child heads toward high school graduation. Each stop is a chance for every parent and teacher to focus on the skills their students are supposed to know at that step, no matter the zip code, language, or race. And more importantly, each standard makes sure all students are learning what they need to know to get to graduation and beyond. Because something like counting to 100 leads to understanding dollars and cents, which eventually leads to understanding how to manage a budget. Secondly, the standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too. Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone. So even though local communities will still design their own curriculum, with the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase. But standards aren't learning. That's why we need teachers, parents, and students to help make that happen by working together to help kids meet these standards. The world's getting more and more competitive every day. But now, when our kids get to the top of their staircase, they can have way more options on where their life goes from there. Clear goals, confident, well-prepared students. That's the Common Core state standards.
So if we look at what MetLife every year does an evaluation of public schools in the United States, and they ask people from across the country to score on a national report card, give our nation's educational system a grade. And they also ask them to score or give a grade to their local schools. Local schools almost always get a B+. In the national level, they get, well, the last 3 times, a D-. So people are more happy, they are more positive about their local school district than they are about the overall education that our country, the educational focus that our country, or direction our country is going. Is a B+ good enough? Is a B+, will that yield us to be number 1? Being satisfied with where we are and what we're doing, is that good enough? As parents and teachers, aren't we always pushing our bright kids to do more? They're like, oh, it's good enough. It's good enough. And that just hurts us almost, because we want them to what? To excel. We want them to push themselves a little harder. And that's what being great is about, isn't it? You don't become great just kind of taking a walk. You don't prepare for a marathon by thinking about it. You have to get up and do something. So, and it requires a change. If we want to be number one, then we have to move differently. In 2009, which was the last time PISA was given, PISA is an international test, and I can already hear, I know some of your arguments. I've been to some of these countries, I know what their educational system's like, so are we comparing apples to apples? No, we're not. But you know what, guys? It doesn't really matter, because these are the data that our politicians in Washington, D.C. use to rub our noses into what they call our failures. So whether they're apples to apples or not, these are the data sets that are used. This is where we fall on this continuum as compared to these countries. So in mathematics, we score 487, Shanghai 600. If we implement the Common Core state standards are college and career ready standards. I like to call them college and work ready standards. The focus and the purpose behind Common Core standards are to get our kids ready for collegiate level success and for the world of work. If we implement Common Core and none of these countries above us do anything to change anything at all that they're doing, this is where we're projected to end up after 5 years of implementation. So we're still not shooting to be number one. Here's our reading. We're at 500. These countries are ahead of us. And again, when you look at implementing Common Core and none of these countries change what they're doing, they continue doing things as do business as usual in their educational systems, then we'll get up to 519 and we still will not be in the top 10. Some people say Common Core is not research-based, that it's an idea that we're playing with and that's dangerous. Well, I don't think ideas tend to be dangerous in and of themselves. I think it's carrying out ideas. But for those of you who have heard that, and there are a lot of rumors out there about Common Core, Massachusetts sat at the table and had a strong voice in creating the standards. Massachusetts has had Common Core level standards for a decade. They were a leader in the discussion of creating the standards. This is how they score on, for example, 8th grade science. Massachusetts scored second. If we pulled Massachusetts scores out and treated it like a country, rather than leaving Massachusetts scores in, because the scores I showed you before were for the country, right? They were the United States scores. If we pulled Massachusetts scores out, they score second on 8th grade science. Now, 8th grade science is content, but what do you have to be able to be good at to do well on a science test? You have to read very well and comprehend and draw conclusions and think. So a state that's had Common Core level standards individually is doing much better. As a matter of fact, here's the US average on 8th grade science, and there's where Massachusetts scored. Here are some additional scores in terms of where Massachusetts is at. This one is on the performance side of taking the science test, or math test, I guess that's math scores. I love USA Today because at least once a week they have some story in there about how bad we are as a country in terms of education. I say that facetiously. I don't know why they don't like us at USA Today, but they don't seem to be our friend. Anyway, it's the education that we're giving our kids today in this country. Does it prepare them for the real world? Now I want parents, we want a cutting edge education for our kids, but we want it to look just like the one we had. We do. We walk into a classroom and we want it to look like and sound like the classroom that we attended. You can't have it both ways. We want report cards to be A, B, C, D, F. Because we understand that. So as parents, we want to prepare our kids for something different, but we want everything to stay the same. You can't have it both ways. We know that we're not preparing our kids for college. As a matter of fact, I taught at Western Illinois University for 12 and a half years, and I left there. I retired from there and went to work as the Vice President of Common Core Institute. And one of the realities is 65% of our incoming freshmen at Western and keep in mind we're not the U of I, so we don't have real high standards for admission, but 65% of our incoming freshmen had to take remedial math, or remedial English, or remedial writing courses. They're 0 credit courses that they have to pay full tuition to take. We don't do it for profit because the tuition that students pay don't go to the institution, they go to Springfield. So however many dollars the math department had to operate their department is all the money they had, and if they had to hire 3 people to teach additional remedial math sections, that came out of the department's budget, and other things didn't get done. So we don't put kids in remedial courses because it's a profit-making venture. But what's really sad and what's really scary is that 15% of those kids, almost every year, that have to take at least one remedial course scored 3.5 or higher GPA as graduating seniors. Now, how do you have a 3.5 GPA and have to take remedial college level courses? Unless the standards for graduating, you have inflated grades to make parents happy, rather than fighting with parents, we'll just give them A's or B's or C's. We lower our standards. Which works in high school when you have a child that graduates 3.75, and you think, oh, my child's really bright, and then they go to college where it actually costs a lot of money today to fail. Even at Western, $12,000 to $15,000 a year for room and board and tuition, and you can't file bankruptcy on student loan debt. So if you go and you flunk out, you have the burden of those debts with nothing to show for it. So how do we get our kids ready for the rigor of college and the rigor of even if you're going to vocational school, which has higher levels of reading requirements than even freshman level reading at Harvard? And I'll show you what I mean by that. So how do we prepare our kids? I found this interesting, and I'll be honest with you, it has nothing to do with Common Core. It has more to do with our society. We don't want to spend money on lab fees, but we'll spend $1,000 on prom. We know Common Core has a real focus in math on algebra. And there's a lot of strong, well-done research on success in college for those kids that have 2 years of algebra, and the correlation of how successful they'll be when they go to college. So having more advanced mathematics and preparing our kids to be able to take those in high school and be successful is key to that college investment turning out to be a good investment. This is ACT, as you can see. This is really looking at what percentage of students graduated that were at the college entrance level for expectation. 1 in 4 met ACT requirements for college admission in all 4 areas that were tested. 1 in 4. So 75% of the kids who spent $120, well, in Illinois we don't have to pay for it. That's a good thing, except for the writing now that the state's not doing the writing. But look at what percentage of our kids are going to college, and really and truly what percentage of them are ready. Some of you have, I'm sure, been aware of the controversy behind Common Core. So you have someone that's saying it's uncommonly inadequate, and you have people that are saying moving ahead, Common Core is a good thing. I happen to believe it's a good thing. It's not perfect. It is absolutely not perfect. It has its faults. I hope that if someone finds a better solution to moving us forward into the 21st century, that they come forward with it. But at this point, I think it's the best solution that we have for moving ahead. The National PTA strongly endorses the Common Core and has from the beginning. Your junior high office has, PTA actually produces for each grade level an interpretation of all the standards at each grade level. It's in English and Spanish. And so as a parent, if you would like to know what your 3rd grader should know and be able to do according to the new standards, or your kindergartner standards are kindergarten through 12th grade. And but your school also has them for you. But you can go to the PTA.org website, and they have not only the standards in Spanish and English in words that are parent-friendly, but also a lot of other very powerful resources that you can use as parents. It's projected that in 4 years, 60% of the jobs in this country will require post-secondary education. I'm going to be real blunt, and I know this will tick some high school teachers off in here, but Anthony and the board knows that there's one thing about me, I really am pretty blunt about things, and that is, in this day and age, a high school diploma is not worth much. It's more of a stepping stone, but it's not worth much. To get a high school education and then to get a job, you're starting off at the same level as someone who really doesn't have a high school education. There are a few $1,000s difference. If you look at a table, every year they put out a table that shows high school dropout and what their lifetime earnings are, and a high school graduate, and someone with technical training, and someone with a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree, and then postgraduate. And they have broken that down to show you the difference. But in the real world, there's not a lot of difference. When I was talking to you earlier about Western, we found these statistics to be true at Western, but these are national statistics. If your son or daughter takes a remedial course, they have a 15% likelihood they'll graduate. It will take them at least 6 years minimum to get a 4-year degree. And only 15 out of 100 will actually graduate with a bachelor's. 85 out of 100 will either drop out or quit. This is the Common Core website. If you hear or read about something about the standards, because I'm going to tell you something about the standards. One of the skills the standards will require your children to know and be able to do is to look for facts. Have you noticed that in our country we've become very opinion oriented? I mean, if I post something on Facebook, you all believe it, even though it may not be true, because we don't do a lot of fact checking. If it's on the web, it must be true. Have you seen that commercial, the Allstate commercial, you know, the French model? Well, it's on the internet, so it must be true. Your children will be adults in a world that is so information rich. They're going to have to be able to identify what's true and what's not. We'll always be able to have opinions. This country was based on opinions. People left their homes because they had opinions and feelings and beliefs. But with so much information out there, we need to teach our kids, where do you look for the right information? Where do you get the greatest level of accuracy? Do you know the American Medical Association has identified for this decade the #1 health risk for this decade is the internet? Do you know why? People go online and do what? Self-diagnose and self-treat. Well, all you have to do is Google yellow spot on left elbow. And somebody out there has Facebooked it or blogged it or something, and it's pre-melanoma. And then you go on how to treat the yellow spot on the elbow. Drink lots of orange juice. It's a true story. Someone with cancer actually took a treatment off the internet to drink orange juice, and when his skin turned orange, true story, when his skin turned orange and he got sicker and sicker, he finally went to the doctor. Unfortunately, it was too late. So how do we teach our kids where to look? Because all websites are not equal. As parents, as adults, as role models for our children, where do we find information? If someone says, for example, I was talking to a superintendent today when I was driving over here, and he said, I had a parent show up at a board meeting, and the parent said, well, I found on a website where it said that the Common Core requires school districts to measure body fat and to take blood from every child. And I said to the superintendent, what? He goes, I know. He said, first question that we'll ask you is, have you even read the standards? Because I can guarantee you, I don't do blood. I don't do my blood, I love my granddaughter, but I don't go with her for shots, I don't do needles. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but it has nothing to do with medicine. Okay. We don't want to, it's not even in the same galaxy of the standards. And yet this person believed in it so much because she had read it online that she went to a board meeting and stood up in a board meeting and said those things. So when you hear things, just check. Go online, read the standards, see if you can find whatever that piece of information is. Because I can write anything online. It doesn't have to be true. So here's the standards. As the video said, they're in math and in English language arts. Here are the states that have adopted. As you can see, there are 5 that have not. Alaska, Texas. Texas is actually aligning their standards. They started 5 years before the work on Common Core standards. Texas started aligning and creating $35 million worth of new standards. And they politically could not come out and adopt the Common Core when they had invested so much of their own money in new standards for their state. But they are now in the process of aligning their standards to the Common Core because since all of these other states are taking one of 2 tests or a state test that's aligned with the standards, they want to make sure that they can compare their students to, in fact, the rest of the nation. Here's what the standards look like for English language arts. As you can see, they go in high school, 9th and 10th are together, and 11th and 12th. But it's very much about information, skills, or knowledge. So, for example, the integration of knowledge. Analyze the representation of a subject or a key scene in 2 different artistic mediums, including what is emphasized or absent in each treatment. For example, you could be comparing a piece of music and a painting, and looking deep into what they mean to you, and being able to then support that. So it's really, there's nothing in here about blood anywhere. And a lot of the other things that I hear oftentimes. ELA, people say, well, I've heard it's about curriculum. It is not about curriculum. It is about skills. How we teach the Common Core is basically up to every district, and the level that they of implementation can be graduated over time. This year, the state test this year is 100% connected to the standards, the Common Core standards. So the test that your kids will be taking this winter for the state ISAT testing will be aligned to, connected to the standards. But there are some definite, what they call shifts or movements, some changes that are directly related to the Common Core. And they're listed here. How many of you on your job read a technical manual or some kind of report or write a report for your job? Say at least once a month. Raise your hands. If you write some kind of report, technical report, or you read something that would put an insomniac to sleep, right? Yeah. Anthony's like, how many of you have to make an appointment with a fiction, with a James Grisham or Danielle Steele or something interesting? You have to make an appointment to read for fun? Because that's what most of us have to do. Most of the reading that we do is technical reading. It's labor intensive, but we don't teach our kids how to read manuals. As a matter of fact, most of us in this room, if your VCR or Bluetooth goes out, or you get a new cell phone, you look at your kid and you say, tell me how to do this. Program, okay, the light's flashing on the VCR or the DVD player, fix it. My solution is to take black tape, electrical tape. It makes the flashing lights go away. It drives my daughter crazy, and when she comes to visit, she takes the tape off and she fixes. But I don't need to know how to do that. I can look at the manuals, but to me it's written in Greek. A lot of the reading that our kids are going to be doing will be technical reading. It'll be manuals. It'll be in a foreign language unless we teach them how to read it. So under the new standards, there's a recognition that we need to do more informational reading. We need to teach our kids, because there's a specific way that you read a manual, isn't there? I mean, it's not like Charlotte's Web. There are no good parts. If there's a good part in a manual, it's the end. Content knowledge, there was a realization, this is almost funny, there's a realization that we need our kids to become experts in something. That a little dab of science and a little dab of social studies and a little dab of this doesn't give them any confidence and doesn't give them a depth of information. And so, especially 6th through 12th grade, having our kids go deep enough into a content area that they are an expert, at least for their age level. A typical science book is over 450 pages long. You guys, I just want you to think about this. How can you become an expert when you are traveling through a textbook at the speed of light? Becoming an expert takes time. And a little dab will not do our kids anymore. When I think about the history that's been created since I graduated from high school in 1972, it's astonishing. U.S. history classes, they didn't get to World War II when I was in high school. I don't know where they're getting to now. And we wonder why we're not learning, we teach history so that we don't repeat the mistakes of previous generations. Well, we don't get to the current generation, so we don't really know what the mistakes are to analyze them. So the Common Core with content is about less is more. In other words, less stuff and going deeper and understanding. Developing a sense of understanding. That's why teachers in the room, you won't like this, but it's not about finding a new textbook series. There are no textbook series out there that I would recommend. Because textbook series, as soon as you open up that book, teachers in the room, as soon as you open up that book on page 1, you think you have to continue through the book until you get to the last page. And even though administratively we could say to you, you can skip 6 chapters in the middle because it's not important. It's just like scratching the chalkboard. You just can't skip those chapters very easily. And you know why? Because teachers will say to me, well, Donna, in 1st grade, if I don't get through the textbook in 1st grade, when they go to 2nd grade, they won't be ready. Makes sense, doesn't it? Except that when they get to 2nd grade, because they went through everything so fast, they're still not ready. How do you learn something that you don't know, guys? It's by spending a lot of time on it. And so less is more. Grade level text complexity, this is really, and I'm going to show you a chart, this is really about the fact that we have dumbed down the type of and level of text, how difficult the words are and the passages are. We've made it easier and easier and easier, which is fine, but then when they get to college and they're expected to read at the college level, or when they go to vocational school and they're expected to read at the 13th grade level and they can't do it because we've lowered and lowered and lowered our expectations. Text-based answers, it really is about not just having an opinion, but going back and finding the facts. Tell me where you found it. Speak with authority. You guys notice that when someone speaks with authority, they have specifics. They don't talk in generalities. So how do we teach our kids to do that? And writing from sources is, again, being able to go back into source as well as academic vocabulary. I was in Washington, D.C. I was one of 10 people from the state of Illinois that was invited to go to this meeting. And a congressman was at this meeting, and he stood up and he looked at me and goes, Donna, can I ask you a question? Well, what do you say to a congressman? No, I don't think so. So I was like, sure, not knowing what he was going to ask. And this is what he said to me. He said, is it asking too much for our kids to sound as educated as they are? Is it asking too much for our kids to sound as educated as they are? Now think about that, guys. Think about the last time you were walking through the mall behind a group of boys or a group of girls that are in high school. Think about having somebody walk in your room, teachers, and the conversation and the vocabulary that they hear in your classroom. Does it indicate the level that your classroom should be reflecting? If you have ninth graders, are they speaking ninth gradeese? Are they barely speaking fourth grade? Do they sound educated? And I'm going to tell you a pet peeve that I have. As I said, I'm 59 years old. I was around when Valley girls were born. And well, I don't know, it went away because you didn't sound very smart when you talked that way. And it was gone for a long time, and then all of a sudden, in the last decade, it has resurrected its ugly head. And I walk into offices of very professional people, and they talk like, they don't sound very educated either. What kind of role models are we? So how do we articulate our ideas? How do we get our kids to talk more at an educated level? Math, some of the shifts with math, or some of the changes in math. For the first time, we've identified what students should know and master at a grade level. You guys need to know that up until this point, in this country, in this state, we've never expected mastery. You can't master something if there's 360 pages in it. A fourth grade math book in our district, before we changed it and took the math books out, we had Saxton. Fourth grade math book had 4 lessons, which were 2 days long each, 4 lessons, so 8 basic lessons, on adding fractions. The teacher supplemented with 2 additional lessons, and then they went on. If you got fractions, if you were capable of adding fractions, you were great. If you weren't, you were screwed, because we moved on. Well, if I can't add fractions, guess where I'm going next? I'm subtracting fractions. Well, if I couldn't add fractions before, now I'm behind even farther because I certainly can't subtract something that I couldn't add. Well, we've got to get through the book. We now have identified what skills need to be mastered at what grade level. That's a good thing, you guys. Because specifically, math is a scaffolded. There are some things I need to be able to do before I can do something else. Within the standards, the only area that starts in kindergarten and goes all the way through high school is geometry. Counting and cardinality is taught in kindergarten, it's expected to be mastered in kindergarten. In the standards, it is not looked at again because there's an expectation they can do it. If they can't do it by the end of kindergarten, then they go into Tier 2 RTI, Tier 2 intervention for additional help. Will all kids in kindergarten in this country master counting? No. But now we at least know what the expectations are. Because certainly I can't move into operations, adding and subtracting, if I can't count, if I have no number concept. So this gives you an idea. Now, teachers, here's the challenge. If it's white, it's not yours. Which means you do not teach it. For the next couple of years, you do not spend time on it. See, there's something that I've noticed a long time ago, actually, long before Common Core, and that is, for example, I might have a teacher who's teaching 6th grade, and they're, let's say, even using Common Core, they're in 6th grade, and they love, let's see, let me do it for an example, ratios. They teach 6th grade, and they love teaching ratios. Then they get bumped down to 3rd grade, because there's a number of, the attendance drops, and so they don't need that teacher, so the teacher gets bumped down to 3rd grade. Well, I love teaching ratios, so guess what I teach in 3rd grade? Ratios. Because they have all the material, and I love teaching ratios, and I have all these fun activities. Teachers, if you teach what you like and not what your kids need, you are part of the problem in their life. You are not part of the solution. This is not about teaching what you like, it's teaching what they need. Now, it's a blessing if they both happen to be the same thing. If what you like is what they need, then it's a win-win. But if there's white space, it is not yours. If I spend time teaching something that I don't need to teach, I'm not spending time on something that I should be teaching. And we only have so much time in the day. One of the things that Common Core has done is in the past we've had what we call a spiral curriculum. In other words, you know what, if you don't get it this year, we'll touch on it again next year, and we'll touch on it again the next year. As a matter of fact, you really don't have to worry because we're going to spend the first 6 weeks next year reviewing. So you can kind of take a siesta because we'll come back to it, right? That's called a spiral curriculum. Common Core changes that. Now we have a scaffolded curriculum. And parents, here's another shift for you. The change here is that if your child masters in kindergarten cardinality, we're not reviewing it in first grade. So the idea that summer break means I can forget everything that I've worked on all school year is going away. As parents even, we're somewhat comfortable. It's like, well, you know, I know we should read a book, and I know we should probably work on math, but they always review when school starts, and so it'll be okay if they review. But that's 6 weeks of our time that we lose doing the new information and new skills we could be developing. And what's interesting is that in the 1960s, when I was in school, it was about the first 2 weeks of school you'd review. And now it's up to 6-7 weeks we review. And here's what else happens, parents, just so you know. Kids will say, I don't know how to do that. They look at us like, really? I don't know how to do that. It's called learned helplessness. If I fake not knowing how to do it, then you can't make me do it. I've had gifted kids who've actually failed tests because they don't want more work. Now that's a real insult to our system, isn't it? As a nation. When our brightest decide that underreporting is better than being real. So we have a scaffold now where the expectation is if we know your child's mastered something, we expect them to continue to, in fact, use those skills. So that we can build on them the next year and build on them and build on them so that when they graduate from high school, they'll actually be ready for college or the career of their choice, vocational skills, school, 2-year, associates, whatever they choose to do. Here's an example of a scaffolded curriculum in terms of a learning progression. So in first grade, we just kind of move up the ladder. We build on skills. The standards also have something called fluency standards. How many of you remember going to school and we had timed math tests? Remember those? Yeah. Some of us stayed in for a lot of recesses working on those flashcards. Remember that? Because it was either spelling words on the board, or I will not run in the hallway, or math facts. That's why I got to spend all my recesses inside when I was in school. Well, and then we moved away from having kids memorize their math facts because for 15 years or so, we thought, well, why do we need to take time to teach them when they can use a calculator? So we'll just teach kids how to use a calculator, right? Rather than making them memorize, spend all that brain power on something they don't really need. Except that now we have college kids who can't do the following problem: 6 times 7 plus 3 without a calculator. There's something to be said if someone says 7 times 9 that you know the answer. And fluency is that. What fluency says is that you automatically know the answer. That you have worked on that problem 6 times 9, you know it's 54. You don't have to count on your fingers, you don't have to take off your shoes, you don't have to look for your battery up or your solar powered calculator, you know the answer. And what I'm going to tell you also happens with those kids that are in fact spending the time doing that, and nationally we're recommending 10 minutes every day to work on math facts. These are the fluency standards. In kindergarten, we expect students to add and subtract up to 5 like this: 1001, 1002. Fluency means I can give you the answer within 2 seconds. So, if you have a 6th grader, that 6th grader is going to be expected to do all of this fluently. So spending 10 minutes every day on math facts is key as we're trying to, in fact, get them up to a level of competency. But what we've also discovered is that when kids are capable of, in fact, doing these automatically, They feel smarter in math. They feel smarter in math. They like math. They see them as good math students. And we also have a lot of research that shows that, in fact, your opinion of yourself as a mathematician greatly influences your abilities within the math classroom. David Coleman is one of the authors of the English Language Arts Standards, and this really kind of sums up, if we had time, we would look at the Gettysburg Address. The Gettysburg Address is the shortest speech ever given by a president. It's 3 paragraphs long. It has some of the most powerful vocabulary in it. For those of you, did anyone in here have to memorize the Gettysburg Address? Oh, sisters. 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth, in 5th grade, what grade did you have to do it in? 8th grade. Mine was 5th grade. And my teacher had a wooden leg, and she was really tall. I'm not kidding, Miss Herka. She never married. She was mean. We had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. Most of the time in history classes, we spend maybe a period talking about the Gettysburg Address. We'll spend more time than that about the Civil War, obviously, but we don't spend a lot of time on talking about and dissecting and looking into the true meaning behind that power of that speech. Under reading like a detective and writing like an investigative reporter, you can actually, in a high school U.S. history class, spend 13 periods just talking about the Gettysburg Address. And looking at the power of the words that Abraham Lincoln used when he wrote that. Think about the last time, girls in the audience, that you wrote a card. I know that's sexist, but I'm sorry. The girls, when you wrote a card and you thought very carefully about the words that you wrote in that card, you didn't just slap something down. But most of the time when presidents write speeches, they pick the words carefully. And they have a lot of power. Words, you guys, words differentiate us economically as much, if not more, than income. Our vocabulary can set us aside and set us apart. When we talk about writing, again, if someone is talking to you about Common Core and they said, well, it just came out of nowhere. In fact, the writing didn't. The type of reading and the writing that we have actually came out of NAEP, which is National Assessment of Educational Progress, and we've been given that test as a nation for a couple of decades. Illinois voluntarily asked school districts to do it on a volunteer basis, but the nation's been doing it for a long time. And we're moving now with our writing to the types of writing that was required under NAEP. By 4th grade, half of what our kids read should be informational and half of it should be fiction. So half nonfiction and half fiction. Teachers in the audience, we know that if you're a female elementary teacher, 80% of the books in your classroom library are fiction. Chick flicks and text. If you're a male elementary teacher, 80% of your classroom library is nonfiction. Why is that? It's because we buy what we like to read. And most girls, most women, do not like to read nonfiction. And yet, half of our classroom oftentimes are made up of what? Boys, who are subjected to reading what we like to read and have less access. Well, thanks to Common Core, school libraries across the country have added many, many more books in their libraries that are nonfiction. And so are classroom libraries. When I talked earlier, I said that what your students are going to be reading is going to be much more difficult. It is. Without going in, and I'll be glad to talk about this with anyone afterwards if you want, but up until 2009, one of the ways that we score a piece of something we read in terms of how difficult is it, how hard is this paragraph, how hard is this page that I'm reading. It's called a Lexile score, and you have gotten Lexile scores on your ISAT scores with your kids forever, okay? So you've seen that word before. Well, under the old standards, these were and we always have a range when you talk about Lexile. These are the new requirements, and the reason that I have this here is because in 7th grade, the beginning of the range under the new standards is higher than the top of the range under the old standards. In other words, what we're going to be having your children begin to read is going to be much more difficult. Now, having said that, I will tell you that when your son or daughter is reading a book, for example, on horses, that text is automatically much more difficult. Nonfiction text is much more difficult text than fiction. The vocabulary is harder, it's much more complex text. So as parents, if you want to help your child become a better reader for the Common Core, having them check out books on things they're interested in, ballet, horses, farming, robots, any of those kinds of topics are actually more challenging text. Yes? 5 minutes, okay. I said earlier that text level. Well, this is the, as you can see here, apprenticeship exam that's online for an electrician. This is put out by the IBEW. I did an analysis, a Lexile analysis of the background information. It scored at a 1440. I did an analysis of a Harvard freshman English book, and it was 1265. We used to think, teachers, that if someone was going into the vocational areas, that we didn't have to worry about them being good readers because they only need to be a good reader if they're going to college. But in fact, technical reading, non-college level, non-college bound kids actually have to have better reading skills because they're reading manuals and reading that nonfiction text. 10,000 hours is how many hours it takes to become a professional at anything. 10,000 hours of practice on the piano, 10,000 hours of lifting weights. I'm told that that's a key breaking point from moving from being good at something to being excellent at something. So the more we can practice and the more help that you can give us in fact, working with your child, like I said, 10 minutes on math facts, and having them read a nonfiction book would be a great way of, in fact, helping us. There's something within the standards, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll take a few questions and we'll draw, is one of the habits of the mind that Common Core really pushes is perseverance. In other words, teaching our kids to not give up. Not every assignment that your child will be doing from now until they graduate will be expected to be done well. Because we don't have the time to do that. But there will be certain activities, certain projects that your child will be expected to do and redo and redo and redo until it meets criteria. What we need for you as parents when they come home whining and complaining about, I need to redo this, this is the 4th time I've had, for you to look at them and say, yes, I know it's hard, but wait till you grow up and you have a mortgage and 2 cars to pay for, and then you can really complain, because right now your life is not too bad. I'm serious, okay? We need for you to say to them, I would suggest you stop whining and get busy and do it. There's a couple of reasons why we need you to do that. Number one, they did that, our parents did that to us, and it really didn't turn out too bad. I don't think any of us in here turned out too bad. Number two, the number one reason that young people are losing their jobs today, 24-year-olds to 30-year-olds are losing their jobs today is because they do not know how to take criticism. One of my really good friends who's a teacher and her husband's a retired state trooper, their son went to Western, he's a good kid. He called his dad up one day and he said, I just want you to know that my boss gave me a report back and he said he didn't like it and I had to redo it and it made me mad and I just told him that he could find somebody else to redo it. He said that I walked off the job. And what's really scary is that little Richard thought Big Richard would think this was a good idea. I said to him later, I said, little Richard, your dad's a state trooper. What part of he's going to think this is stupid did you not anticipate? He said, well, I just can't, nobody should treat me that way. I'm just like, okay. So when he told his dad that he quit, his dad said, you have a $1,200 a month apartment. You have a car payment, you have a student loan debt. Oh, I'll get another job. 3 months later, he moved home. The moral of this story is the higher our standards are in K-12, the less likely your 32-year-old son with 3 kids will move home. So that room that you've turned into, you know, an exercise room, you can keep an exercise room, you don't have to go find bunk beds. The world isn't going to look at our kids and say, oh, you're a good kid, I'll cut you some slack, guys. And a lot of reasons. And number one is there are a lot of people in other countries that are hungry for work. We need to get back to having a work ethic with our kids and young adults and old adults that made this nation the great nation it is. And whining won't get us there. It really won't. Names? Who has the drawing? Who has the bucket with the names? Wow, okay. While she's coming down here. Any questions? Does anyone have a question for me? Well, you guys are too nice. I didn't make anybody mad. Is anybody leaving mad? Who's Pearson? Pearson, yeah, Pearson is a company that's getting rich. Kind of like Ruby Payne got rich off of poor people. Pearson is getting rich off Common Core, okay? Because they've gotten some of the contract work for creating the assessments, and they are going out and giving districts free computers if you buy their curriculum that will get your kids ready. I've met some of your teachers tonight, and I'm going to tell you as parents, those of you who are parents in here, you have a fine, fine, fine group of teachers. They know their stuff. I'm sitting and listening to their conversation and dialogue around their content area, and I'm blown away with their level of expertise. You don't need a Pearson to get your kids ready. All the ingredients that you need as a community are here. And I've met with your administrators, I've talked with them, and your district is so far ahead of a lot of the districts that I work with. I have districts calling me up and say, what's this Common Core thing? I'm serious. Like, really? The test starts next year, and actually it's this year. Oh, well, we thought it'd go away, so we haven't stressed anybody out about it. You not only have a good facility here, you have a great staff. Your kids are getting a good education from everything that I can see. So, name, drum roll, $50. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sir. My favorite board member. It's the only one I recognize.
How do you see the electronic era fitting?
How do I see the electronic era fitting? Well, in terms of testing, this year the state's going to let us choose between the electronic testing and paper pencil. I think that within the English language arts standards, at every grade level, there's a need for our students to be able to use technology. The good news, folks, is your child's grade may not just be a paper, pencil, multiple choice, Scantron. It may be where they create a brochure, and they do it on a computer. The tools of their lives and their generations, not of our world. So technology's key. It's just a lot of districts aren't there yet, because I was down in Southern Illinois, guys. I was in a school district, Egyptian, where they have dial-up for the school. And they have all this wonderful technology, and they say they sign up for when their kids can log on. Every room has iPads and everything else. I mean, it's flush because it's a very low performance school. You know, I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to tell the number, okay? Because I got to say this. In this country, right now in the educational system, those schools that underperform have gotten lots of money. Egyptian high school has less than 150 kids. They got $1 million a year for 4 years, $5,000 extra per student on top of all the other money they got, but they have dial-up. And the reason they got that extra money is because their scores are so low. Do you know what your district could do with $5,000 per student extra for 3 years? It would blow you into the next galaxy. Okay, I have a number. Get out your little red tickets. 463-207. Come on down! Woo! you have a question that you'd like to ask. Thank you so much, teachers in the room that came. Thank you, thank you, thank you, parents. You're wonderful. Have a great night.
Very good. Thank you.
There's refreshments in the cafeteria.